I've been asked to speak on emergency then and now, and what is the comparison? What is the difference? You see, the first point is that yes, 1975 Indira Gandhi's emergency was the complete suspension of your constitutional democracy, and that was a declared emergency. What we have today is an undeclared one. And in fact, in certain respects, the attacks on democratic rights and civil liberties are much more severe than they were at that time. Undoubtedly, the emergency of Indira Gandhi in 1975 had various factors that the party had analyzed. Our Central Committee had a separate resolution on why this emergency had come. The crisis, the economic crisis and the crisis of the ruling classes and the path of economic development they were following. There was a great growth of unrest amongst the people. And the highest manifestation of that was the railway strike, the All India Railway strike that preceded just before the emergency. And that showed the anger of the working class against this degree of exploitation. There was infighting within the Congress party. The Congress party lost the elections in Gujarat. There was a big anti-corruption movement that was going on in Bihar under the leadership of Jayaprakash Narayan. And corruption, anti-corruption, anti-Congress, that sentiment among the people was growing. Accompanied with this was the crisis within the ruling party itself, with their groupism and their infighting, and the splits within the Congress between the indicate and the syndicate that happened earlier and that followed, and their implication of it on what should be the path for capitalist development and profit maximization for the ruling classes. That was an issue on which there was a great deal of infighting. And then finally came the Allahabad High Court judgment, where the election of Indira Gandhi itself was nullified. And that was the final straw in order to maintain herself and the position and to consolidate herself internally within the Congress and to quell the growing people's movement all across the country, which was having a very anti-Congress, a very, very sharp anti-Congress turn. That emergency was imposed in order to control all that. And in the process, a presidential proclamation was issued. And that resolution was finally discussed in the parliament, even during those days. Comrade A.K. Gopalan from our party, he was released after a week in jail. And his speech there has been very famous. I mean that is what set the tone for the fight against the emergency. And to my generation, when we were all students, that was the first attack on democracy, which we took it for granted after independence. And this was formally done through a resolution in the parliament. And this abrogation of all these rights, the fundamental rights, the suspension of the parliament, extending it for 6 years instead of 5, and the trampling on the state and the state assemblies, all this was accompanied by very severe censorship and draconian laws like the MISA, Maintenance of Internal Security Act, and the various other DIR, Defense of India rules. And under this, thousands of people were arrested, and particularly all the major opposition leaders. Our own party, more than 2,000 of our comrades were arrested. Party had to go underground, conduct the resistance, and that united people's resistance finally pushed the situation to a brink where Indira Gandhi was forced to call for an election. Of course, with the presumption that she is going to sweep it, which is what the IB reportedly then gave her the information. But nevertheless, once the elections were announced, there was a big national upsurge and for the restoration of democracy. And all of us know the history that happened later. Indira Gandhi was defeated and all the laws that were promulgated all the amendments that were made to the constitution for declaring the emergency were all annulled, and we succeeded in establishing the democratic structures back. However effective, but they were back as law. But that was a big battle of the Indian people that was conducted against an official declared emergency. And you had press censorship of the worst variety. You had also his master's voice or her master's voice in terms of the then growing Doordarshan that was coming in, and then the entire propaganda machinery of the government. So, I mean, all this was there for about 21 months, and in the later stages reducing. And then you had slum clearances, forcible evictions of people, and forcible sterilization of particularly the minority communities in order to control the population. And with all these factors, that was something that the people of India rejected. What happened then was, and this is important to understand when we compare it with today, what happened then was that your constitutional rights and constitutional democracy was suspended. Because it was suspended, it could be restored. What is happening today with this undeclared emergency? Undeclared in the sense that it has not come through any official presidential ordinance or a proclamation or any resolution in the parliament. But in practice, what is happening today is not the suspension of our constitutional democracy and rights guaranteed by the Constitution, democratic rights, civil liberties, human rights. But what is happening today is the destruction of this very Constitution and its fundamental pillars. In that sense, though it is not a formally declared emergency, but the battle that is taking place today is a battle that has much graver implications for our country's future. Yes, that was a big battle that had to be won. That was won. Emergency was declared, Indira Gandhi defeated, different matter, she came back. And she came back as an MP from your state, where she contested the elections, and we were all making posters asking the people of Karnataka to defeat her. But then she was back in parliament, and then you know what happened after 1980, etc., etc. So the difference, the crucial difference between the two is that it's not an issue of declared, undeclared. What was suspended then could be restored. What is happening today is destruction. And this destruction has to be stopped and reversed. And that is the battle that we are engaged in today. That is the fundamental difference that we have to understand. Why I'm saying it's a destruction, I'll come to.
Yeah.
Now, to understand this, why I'm saying it's aimed at destroying this constitution and this constitutional order, we have to go back into the history of our freedom struggle very briefly. That itself is a separate class that will have to be required. So I'm very briefly recapitulating the point so that we understand why do they pose this sort of a danger of destruction of this secular democratic republic under our constitution. During the freedom struggle, three visions of what should be the character of independent India emerged. There's a long history to it. But these three visions that emerged, the leader of the Indian national movement, the Congress Party, recognizing the diversity and plurality of India, its multilingual, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, nature of our people, came to the conclusion that a future independent India can only be a secular democratic republic. Correct. The communist vision, the second vision, which argued saying that yes, it has to be a secular democratic India. On that, there's no dispute, but it cannot stop there. This secular democratic India will have to move towards socialism, towards giving actual economic equality to the people. What we need is not only political independence, but we need the economic independence of our people, and that is possible only when we move towards socialism, but only maintaining a secular democratic republic framework while pursuing economic policies that deprive people of their economic independence. That is more exploitation of the people through this capitalist path of development that the Congress party and the ruling classes were following. This will be destructive of the secular democratic republic itself. That was a warning communists gave then, and it's a warning that's valid even today. And that is because of this growing discontent amongst the people will be utilized by the reactionary forces for their objective, establishing their objective, and that is exactly what is happening today. As opposed to both these visions was the third vision. And this third vision argued that India, future of India, India's character, independent India's character, must be defined by the religious affiliation of its people. This had a twin expression. This vision had twins. One was the RSS propagating their understanding of what they call the Hindu Rashtra, and then Jinnah's Muslim League advocating an Islamic Republic. Now, this vision was directly opposed to the visions of the Congress and the left. And this was a vision because of which the partition of India had to take place, unfortunately. The Islamic Republic of Pakistan was formed, but India and the Indian freedom struggle stood firm and steadfast in saying that India will be a secular democratic republic. That is where the RSS felt that they were being betrayed. If Jinnah could get his Islamic Republic, why not a Hindu Rashtra here? And it was that the first victim of that anger, the major victim of that anger, communal riots were going on all over the place there. But the first major victim of that anger, the tallest of the leaders of the national movement, Mahatma Gandhi, was assassinated. And since then, after the RSS was banned, once India was declared independent, everybody thought that that danger was over. That was a very, very serious mistake. We were warning communists that that danger is not over, because what is the conception of the Hindu Rashtra, and which was later developed into Hindutva by Savarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who coined this term Hindutva to say that in India, India belongs only to those people who are affiliated to religions born in India. He said your Matrubhumi, Pitrabhumi, and then he says your Punya Bhumi. Those whose Punya Bhumi, like Muslims and Christians who are outside of India, they are aliens. And he says Hindutva has nothing to do with Hindu religion. Hindutva is a political project. And this is what Golwalkar, then the chief of the RSS, also said, that Hindu Rashtra of theirs is that India will remain only a land for the Hindus, as it has always been, which is also a false claim. And therefore, all non-Hindus will have to live as second-class citizens under the tutelage and leadership of the Hindus. If they don't accept it, they'll have to be thrown away. And what will be the character of this Hindu Rashtra? Go back to the order prescribed in the Manusmriti. Go back to the question of your caste divided and Varna society, where on the basis of caste oppression, your social oppression continues. And through that, the oppression of Dalits, Adivasis, the women, etc. And on the basis of that, bring back the old order of the Manusmriti. And that is why it has a rabidly intolerant character and has a fascistic agenda of intolerance towards all non-Hindus. And this they very clearly articulated. We have to learn from Hitler how he achieved this under Nazi Germany, how that attack on the Jews, how the attack on all the non-Germans or the inferior races, as they call it, how that was carried out. That must be the methodology we have to adopt. That is why when our party program defines this Hindu Rashtra as a fascistic project, a rabidly intolerant, totalitarian, fascistic project, It is this fascistic project, the word we use in our program. This is the meaning of this fascistic project. And after Mahatma Gandhi's assassination, when RSS was banned, it could not directly take part in politics. So Golwalkar was looking for the political arm of the RSS. That was first the Jansangh, that also has a big history. And then the later avatar is the BJP. So BJP is nothing but the political arm of the RSS implementing the RSS agenda of converting the secular democratic Republic of India, according to our constitution, into a rabidly intolerant fascistic Hindutva Rashtra. And that is why, to achieve that purpose, they require to destroy this constitution and its constitutional guarantees that it gives to the people, so that only through the destruction of this constitution can their project succeed of converting India into a Hindutva Rashtra. So that is the meaning of saying that their target is the destruction of our constitutional order. And that is the greatest danger we have as a modern secular democratic republic under a constitutional order. That is the threat that they pose. Now, if this has to be achieved, then every single foundational pillar of our constitution has to be undermined. And that is exactly what we are seeing with renewed vigor happening ever since 2014 and ever since Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of our country, whose target, as announced by him, is by the time India reaches 75th anniversary of our independence in 2022, India would be, with declaration or without declaration, that Hindutva Rashtra, with the completion of the Ram temple in Ayodhya, with the building of the Modi Nagar or the Central Vista in New Delhi, and with the capturing of power administration by elections, manipulating elections, changing elections, defections, everything else, and gain electoral legitimacy for the destruction of this very constitution that gives the right for this electoral democracy. So that is why it is a very dangerous thing. So therefore, with this destruction in mind, the Indian constitution rests on four foundational pillars. These four foundational pillars are secular democracy, they are social justice, the third is federalism, center-state relations, and the fourth is economic self-reliance or economic sovereignty of our country and its people. Each one of them is now under tremendous assault during the last 7 years. Let's take economic self-reliance or economic sovereignty. The slogan Modi gives is economic self-reliance, Atmanirbhar Bharat. But the entire economic policies that are being forward is actually not economic self-reliance, but it is economic self-subservience to foreign and domestic capital. Everything is being privatized, as all of us know. Every rights of the working people are being trampled upon, like what happened with all the trade union rights and labor laws. Every area of our economy is encroached and handed over to private capital and corporates. Now the latest is the agriculture and the big farmers' struggle that is continuing for 7 months and more. And that is an indication of how they want to hand over our agriculture, our annadatas, our harvest to multinational corporations and to big Indian corporates for their profit maximization. Every single mineral resource, the mining of it is privatized. Every single public utility, except for air now, but even that is coming under pressure. Everything else is now has to be bought by the people. Every single water, electricity, everything else. And in this way, this privatization is completely destroying the self-sufficient basis of the Indian economy and people's rights to public utilities and public services. Likewise, this privatization continues in the field of health, which we are seeing having devastating impact during this pandemic, on privatization of education, of every other service that you can think of. What is actually therefore emerged today is the implementation of these neoliberal reforms with a vengeance that is happening in the last 7 years. And in the process, a new nexus has developed in our country. And that nexus is what the Central Committee defined as the corporate communal nexus. And this corporate communal nexus is breeding the worst type of crony capitalism and is breeding the worst and the highest forms of political corruption that the country has known. So that foundational pillar is being destroyed with this loot of our national wealth and people's wealth. National assets and people's wealth are being looted in order to achieve this purpose in the name of economic self-reliance. It's actually a subservience to the rule of capital with the emergence of this communal corporate nexus. Then take the other pillar of secular democracy. Secularism we have seen with this entire campaigns of hate, violence against the minorities. You've seen the manner in which the marginalization of minorities is taking place. This is the first time in India's history that a ruling party in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, does not have a single Muslim MP. The first time in assemblies like in Uttar Pradesh, where the ruling party does not have a Muslim MLA. The marginalization of the Muslims, the marginalization of the religious minorities, that is proceeding in a big way, along with the campaigns of hate, violence. And this is undermining the foundations of secularism. Democracy. You see today, even Modi tweeted, saying we cannot forget 21 months of emergency. 34 months, the Bhima Koregaon detainees are under UAPA, under this Modi government, without a single charge being proved or even heard in the courts. Likewise, any dissent of this government is termed as anti-national and arrested under UAPA and sedition acts. So any democratic rights, civil liberties and human rights have today reached the lowest ebb in our country, recognized by all international surveys, whether it's the World Freedom Index, whether it's the World Hunger Index, in terms of the representative of people. In every single index, we are in fact today called an electoral autocracy. India has been reduced to an electoral autocracy, the destruction of democracy, secular democracy. Then on social justice, you've seen this horrendous, brutal gang rapes of Dalit girls and their murders. You've seen the manner in which the social prejudices against the Dalits and the lower caste has increased tremendously during these 7 years, and how they are targeted by the ruling parties and particularly the BJP, wherever is ruling in those states. Likewise, Adivasis, after a long bitter fight, we got the Forest Rights Act. That is being completely and thoroughly undermined. Your sub-plans for the Dalits and Adivasis, they are not functioning. They're not existing now. And women, the worst atrocities on women have grown during this period, to the extent that there's a dehumanization of our society that is taking place. So the social justice, instead of achieving or moving towards social justice, we are having the social injustice is growing very rapidly. And center-state relations, federalism, with the GST, whatever little rights that the states had to raise resources to meet their own promises, state governments' promises to their own people, those rights have just been vanquished. Even the legitimate dues for the states, GST dues, are not being paid by the center. The burden of managing the pandemic is shoved onto the state governments without no financial assistance. When Modi himself is collecting in his private trust thousands of crores of rupees, which is unaccountable, the PM cares, whatever the name that is given, but no money is transferred to the states. The rights of the states are trampled upon because in order to establish their fascistic Hindutva Rashtra, they require a unitary state, not a federal state. And to achieve that unitary state, this federalism and the principles of federalism have to be destroyed. And that is what has happened. So all the four fundamental pillars are under tremendous danger of being completely destroyed. But in order to achieve this, it is important that every single independent institution established by the Constitution must be undermined and made dysfunctional. That begins with the Parliament. The least number of days that the Parliament met is during these last 7 years. No discussions in Parliament. Brute majority, things are passed. Rajya Sabha, where they don't have a majority, they bypass using some manipulated clause of a money bill in the Constitution. And in this way, Parliament is rendered ineffective. It's not even today, it's worse than a talking shop. That what we used to complain earlier that it was being reduced. Then you take the Supreme Court or the judiciary. For 2 years now, the challenges to the abrogation of Article 370 are pending without being heard. The challenges to the Citizenship Amendment Act are pending without being heard. The challenges to this electoral bond scheme that is facilitating legalizing political corruption, those have not been taken up. The challenges to the EVM and the functioning, etc., and how that should be done, that is not being taken up. All important cases where the court has to interpret whether the laws passed by the Parliament are in accordance with the Constitution, they are all, on all of that, the judiciary is silent, which means in practice, they are being implemented, even though all of us know they are blatantly anti-constitutional. And likewise, you take the Election Commission. Never have we seen the Election Commission work in such a partisan manner. And despite all complaints, all these things, a free and fair elections have never been held during this period. Till date, the final voting figures also are not available in many cases because of the mismatch between what the returning officers note in each booth and what is registered in the EVMs. So this way, that institution is undermined. Then you see the CBI, the ED, they function more as the arm, political arm of the government. All those who are against this government, cases are swept on them. They are harassed. All those who defect from other parties and join the BJP, they are protected. And it is through this blackmail, brandishment, that they are getting political support of various leaders and various regional parties. Now, this way, all the institutions are being undermined. So this is an assault on our Constitution. That is why I said comparison with the emergency of 75 and now, what was suspended then is being destroyed today. That is the danger we have to face. But at the same time, in order to achieve this, they require to mobilize the people in their support. And for that, the main weapon that they have is this communal polarization. Sharpening of communal polarization is the manner in which they want to consolidate the Hindutva communal vote bank. And through the consolidation of that, through the spread of terror, hatred, poisonous propaganda, they wish to consolidate this to garner and maintain their support base, political and social support base. But at the same time, in order to achieve this, it is also necessary to ensure that they are able to control the people's minds and thinking and people's consciousness. And that is why it is important for them to destroy your modern education, however inadequate it was since independence, but to remove any emphasis on scientific temper and scientific thinking. That is why they have to attack reason. And in place of reason, you have unreason. They have to attack rationality. And in place of rationality, you have irrationality. And that is the essence of the new education policy. That instead of students learning the syncretic character of Indian history, the evolution of our civilization, our history is reduced only to the epic stories of Mahabharata and Ramayana. That is history. Nothing else is history. Our philosophy, which various streams that has come in, with Basavanna from Karnataka, to Adi Shankara, to various streams, to Buddhism, to Jainism, to all the things that had the seeds of a materialist basis. This rich philosophical tradition is to be replaced by Hindu theology. And that is why this thing of talking of Vedic education. And to go back there, that is to condition people's minds so that it is easy for irrationality to triumph. What is the difference between rationality and irrationality? Whatever we see today, we don't understand it fully. There are various things that we need to understand. But those we do not understand, we probe to try and understand. In a rational discourse, we try to understand what is not being understood. But what does irrationality do? That there is no need of any scientific attempt to understand. If you cannot understand, then it is the supernatural. The supernatural, your faith, is what will make you understand, not reason, not rationality. And that is why the attack on scientific temper, the growth of obscurantism, of superstition, and it is this that is creating this sort of a mindset where people can accept, in the name of cow protection laws, killing of Muslims. They can accept, in the name of, abandoning rationality, they can accept all this poisonous propaganda and the attacks on minorities. And it is to condition that. That means control education. So the sum total of all this is that the destruction of our constitution, the destruction of our independent constitutional institutions, the destruction of the constitutional guarantees for individual freedom, human liberties, democratic rights, and civil liberties, and the destruction of the right to expression. Any dissent today is anti-national, therefore you can be jailed. So that is why, as our 22nd Party Congress identified, for us to achieve our revolutionary objective of moving towards a people's democratic revolution, it is essential that this constitution be preserved and improved so that these guarantees can be utilized for our class struggles and our movements. And if that is required, then separating the BJP from control of state power, control of the governments, is the utmost task. That is why the first point of the political line we worked out in the last party congress is that this BJP government should be dislodged. And this attack, in order to achieve this, is not only through electoral tactics, but through the building up of mass struggles and mass movements and sharpening of class struggles. That is happening today. It's happening with this farmers' struggles. It is happening with the working class movements against privatization and against the abrogation of their own rights. It is happening among the students and youth against this growing unemployment and destruction of education. It is happening amongst women against this entire growth of atrocities on women and the crimes against women. It is happening with the unorganized workers and with the big Anganwadi Asha worker movements. All this discontent has to be channelized to ensure the isolation and complete ultimate defeating of the BJP and separating it from the holding the reins of government. Because it is through the holding of the reins of government that they are able to achieve the destruction of this very constitution that gave them the right to form this government. And they want to achieve all this by gaining some sort of an electoral credibility. That is why, what is the general saying today in the country? In an election, whoever may win, but eventually it will be the BJP that will form the government. It happened in your state. It lost the election, but it is in government. It happened in Goa. It's happened in Madhya Pradesh. It's happened in the Northeast in various states. And now they are trying to do the same thing in other non-BJP states like